Welcome everyone to another episode of the Shamans Way podcast. As always, this episode comes from the teachings of our amazing friend and shaman in residence, Kriket. We hope you're enjoying these podcasts as much as we enjoy making them, and I'd like to take just a moment to ask you if you would please leave us a rating and a comment in iTunes or whichever podcast player you're listening to us from. Giving us a rating and sharing this podcast with others is the biggest way you can tell us that you like our show. Now, without further ado, on with the episode.
Well, hello to my constant listener, and welcome back to my semi-constant listener, and a very warm and special hello to my brand new listener. So, constant listener, how tired are you of hearing me discuss soul retrieval? Today we are going to work with the topic of healing the psyche. So you, my constant listener, and likely even you, my semi-constant listener, but most likely not you, my brand new listener, know that I have dedicated time to exploring the concept of soul retrieval, the process of soul retrieval, and what it would look like in other cultures and other traditions, how they would express or what words they would use for soul retrieval. In healing the psyche, I wanted to take a comparison between what is seen as the soul loss from a psychological perspective and what is seen as soul loss from a shamanic perspective. So I try to be somewhat objective, however, recognizing that just by being a practitioner of shamanism, I lose some of my objectivity and it becomes subjectivity. If you will allow me, my constant listener, this indulgence in soul retrieval, I can't promise you it will be my last, but if you do have something to share with me about what you've listened to and what you no longer want to hear, by all means send me an email through Shamans Way. What is the psyche? I'm not sure everyone asks that question, but I certainly have. I have turned to my favorite starting place, no constant listener, not mythology, but etymology. This comes from the Etymology Dictionary online, and it is linked at the bottom of the page on Shamans Way. This is a direct quote, you know me, 1640s, air quotes, animating spirit, end air quote, from Latin psyche, the soul, mind, spirit, life, one's life, the invisible animating principle, understanding the mind as the seat of thought, faculty of reason. Be without further ado, I am going to weave my way through healing the psyche. Healing the psyche begins in the unconscious, but where and what exactly is that thing we call the unconscious? Beneath the threshold of our day-to-day awareness, the unconscious holds the complex tapestry of the many parts of ourselves, our personal traits, the ones we are aware of and the ones we are not. This is the unknown realm, the spirit world, unknown to our ordinary awareness of space and time. The spirit world is no less real than known reality. Psychology is convinced that what takes place in the unconscious actually shapes our everyday life and determines our behavior. What I have gleaned is that the unconscious is the greater reality without which our ordinary awareness is too fragmentary and narrow to adequately understand itself. Those are Kriket words, but that would be a kind of a summation of what I've gleaned through the years. Jung may not have called it soul loss. Instead, he translated it into modern thinking. He believed soul loss, now get a load of this, was a quantity of psychic energy, and that normally belongs to the ego, but somehow this has disappeared into the unconscious. This package of the psychic energy, that would normally power your daily activities with attentiveness or enthusiasm, the ability to make decisions even. In modern psychology, we would explore the dreams and active imagination as access ways or doorways to find out what that energy is up to now in its out of sight in the dreaming. So it doesn't cease to exist. Through engaging the active imagination, a therapist may try to discover the emotional and the symbolic significance for everyday life, so that energy may be restored to the ego, so that life can restart with new vigor and follow a more or a new or a different or even a satisfying direction. In modern psychology, it is that recognition that the dreams and the active imagination are what they're going to access, how they're going to move that energy. How do we access the health of the soul? The soul piece is found in the spirit world in an alternate form of reality. And this interpenetrates and extends far beyond this one. So the spirit world has fingers and has influences in this conscious reality, and past the boundaries of this conscious reality. I travel for you, the patient, and the etymology of patient is one who suffers. When I refer to someone as a patient, it's not based in our modern hierarchical medical model, rather as recognizing a suffering human. So the mid-14th century, paciente, capable of enduring misfortune, suffering without complaint. The old French, bearing directly from the Latin, meaning bearing, supporting, suffering, enduring, permitting. It is the base word also for patience. Anywho, tangent ended. More often than not, what I experienced during the soul retrieval in the journey is really very close to the psychological state of my patient at the time. Your soul is the guardian of all of the symbols and the stories that live in the collective unconscious, these symbols and these stories of you, as well as in that shared experiences. Words and images often show up to remind us of our own intrinsic wholeness. When you have a great idea that resonates with your values and your beliefs, it uplifts you, and it is your soul. When a beautiful melody or verse comes streaming into your awareness, this is your soul. So in that process of doing the soul retrieval, in that process of the journey, when I'm in your place, I'm in your world, when your healer is in your spirit world, it's a different place to be. Not very long ago, I was journeying for a soul piece. I became so small, I was a molecule of water moving through granite. It was definitely one of the few times I felt a wave of panic. I could not imagine my way out of it. I called the usual helpers, Vainamonen, even the spirit of the stone and the rock people, to try to get me out of this incredibly tight, frightening experience of no way out. It was quite identical to the mental state that my patient had been in not many months before, even before visiting my healing room. The debilitated condition which appeared to me, it replicated my patient's. I work with the shamanic metaphysical assumptions. The soul piece that has been lost is distinct and recognizable and can be found by someone unrelated. And that would be me. That would be you. The soul piece can be found almost anywhere, buried, sometimes very deeply and deftly hidden in the unconscious realm. I'm guided not only by my own intuitive wisdom. I generally say that the drum never lies. But I'm also guided by the spirits of the patients in my room. Everyone is united for that positive outcome, that piece of the soul coming home. And the stories and the explanations for this loss of a soul piece, more often than not, are in line with the soul story of the human I am journeying on behalf of. Life stories are laid out in front of me, and I have no way of knowing any of this story prior to entering the spirit world. I have met therapists with varying degrees, and I have had a few who have openly scorned my experience and even my own theories in relationship to psychotherapy and shamanism. I have ceased to take their narrow-minded views to my heart. Jung persevered to find ways to replace using talk therapy as a way of addressing what ailed patients. It was this drive to find deeper solutions for wounded souls and to the wounded experience that he began his explorations into the deeper psyche and into archetypes. Archetypes are those universal human themes. They're modes of perception and patterns of behavior invested with compelling emotional values. And these can help draw the patient into a new way of life. Bringing psychology and shamanism together under the same roof may not happen immediately, but I think we're getting closer. I see shifts in perceptions of where psyche resides and how psyche affects the conscious mind in more subtle ways than I ever first imagined. In my almost 3 decades of working with the soul, I have seen a growing interest in some of the older ascribed beliefs of the shamanic spirit world. I teach the spirit world runs independent of us. The unconscious self is objective in a loose meaning, in the sense that it works to affect changes in our lives and assist us in discovering our unconscious wholeness, recovering soul gifts that have been split off. It is also a collective realm, as in a reality shared by us all. During the recounting of a journey, I encounter the collective and shared reality between the patient and myself. And it is in this shared place I'm able to see and hear past conversation and even witness past events. It must be unnerving at times and elating to others to hear the individual story coming from another. I am uninvolved and I am an uninvested party. Healing the psyche would be remiss if the patient did not attempt to take their own journey and to meet the soul pieces that have returned. I've often mused for some, entering into the journey state might be akin to experiencing the breakdown of the world as they know it, and for some it really is. And the domain of space and time usually disintegrates. And I see that a lot in our perception of time. What do you mean that was 20 minutes? It felt like 2. Or what do you mean that was 15 minutes? It felt like an hour and a half. Our agreed upon reality, that public consensus, what the modern West takes to be the only world there is. The reality we measure in feet or centimeters, in seconds and degrees. All of this blurs and becomes indistinct the moment we encounter a spirit larger than us. Perhaps even our own higher self, or even the words of the authentic self might ring for you. In our day-to-day lives, we tend to tune this spirit or this voice of spirit out. Many humans appear to be frightened of it. I can't always blame them. It is a challenge to negotiate the superhighway of spirit while, for me, navigating the bridges and the not awake drivers in the morning rush hour. I don't want to be having a journey or experiencing those, that interpenetration of the spirit world with our world while I'm trying to navigate morning traffic. No, thank you very much. I'd quite as much just kind of like to stay present if at all possible. So I get it. But most of us screen this world out just a bit too effectively. With soul loss, I've experienced an interior soul world even more diminished, witnessed by the encounters I have had with what I just call disempowered misery. All of us have lost our greater selves to some extent. Soul loss can create an unusually narrow and perhaps even claustrophobic world. Soul loss screens out too much and has lost a piece of their actual sensing of self. If it is not there, it is unlikely to be sensed. If we've lost it and we've lost the ability to sense it, how do we know it's lost? That quantity of selfhood has been banished or taken away or even put away. Many times I've met pieces put away for self-keeping, given to the unconscious self, which is held in the collective unconscious, in the spirit world. Often I find soul pieces in shadowy realms or tucked deep into one of the many levels of worlds of the underworld or the lower world. Shamanism takes the real as being out there, outside the individual. It assumes that the soul has gotten lost, strayed indeed even into a foreign realm, and can only be retrieved by a specialist who's learned something of the topography of the greater divisions of the world. And some of us have even acquired a spirit guide to direct the search for the lost soul that has wandered far from its host, far from its primary self. Meanwhile, psychotherapy, because it takes the real as being in here, inside the individual, assumes that the soul itself is not really lost and has not strayed. Rather, it is present but unrecognized. The patient has become unconscious of her soul's presence. The soul doesn't have to be chased or led. The doors of perception have to be opened so that the patient can consciously connect with a soul that has been there all along. By using different techniques, it is my hope the therapist is able to enable the patient to experience the recognition of the soul aspect, to bring a patient to the inner realm, to use techniques which I assume touches at the very least on the edges of altered states of awareness. In using these altered states of awareness, we're opening ourselves to the influence of the spirit world, of the cosmos, and that ever-present healer archetype, or that ever-present priest or priestess archetype. Whether experienced internally through talk therapy and guided imagery or through the drum, the rational mind accepting the irrational, intangible soul piece, and further accepting that the soul piece is found. I cannot stress deeply enough the importance of being found. This means acquiring a living experience of having a soul and being a soul. The healing takes place when we bring forward into consciousness the awareness. This is more of that awake and alert awareness that I often talk about. The awareness that a change has occurred within the inner dynamics, so the inner processing in the unconscious self, in the personal unconscious, in the conscious self. So in the lower world, the middle world, the upper world, in the infant self, in the higher self, all of these things, this change affects the function of the entirety of self. If the patient can hold this new frequency, the new story, or the now popular phrase, the new narrative, as a storyteller, when I hear somebody say, well, I'm going to change my narrative, it just makes me fucking giggle. Man, we've been changing our narrative since the dawn of it. I'm glad you're waking up to the fact you can change your narrative. Anyway, tangent off. In accepting this, the fact that the patient, can you hold this new frequency, this new story? Can you begin to be told or perhaps even be written? So we redirect attention away from the narrow, almost claustrophobic view of self and how the self is allowed to function. Behavior and thought patterns can be pernicious little buggers, and we engage the conscious mind to accept changes have occurred in the unconscious mind. So the spirit world, where the soul has been living unconsciously, has emerged to the forefront of attention and generated powerful FULL fascination for the whole being. The self-perceived and experienced barriers to the whole self have been destroyed or perhaps even gently removed. And soul loss is a dance partner with death. Even the land of the dead, one of the more common places I'm guided to. From my perspective, this is a blatant manifestation of the spirit world held reality. In my journeys, I can experience another's pain and loss. I can have a personal relationship with the emotional state of my patient's mind, such as the molecule of water in the granite rock. Being inside one's spirit world can leave me changed and altered forever, as well as it can my patient. I have had countless patients report sharing the experience of my journey through visualizations, physical sensations, emotional responses, just to name a few. The patient shares how they were connected to me in our sacred space, the shared sacred space that we created. For some, when I suck the soul pieces into the stone I carry in my mouth, they feel an immediate reaction. And many can describe being affected in all 4 states of human. Well, they don't really say it in those words, but the story is there. Nonetheless, there is an unmistakable and crucial link between us. There is a soul-to-soul connection between my altered state of consciousness and my patient who has lost conscious connection with an aspect of their soul or the expression of their soul. Sometimes joy returns. Sometimes I return to golden light, or even the voice. The patient, when I'm journeying, is conscious in the room, but time and time again in the metaphysics of shamanism, our souls have connected, and they too feel the connection and report back physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual manifestations of that connection. I think it bears examination, the relationship between what I experience in the spirit world and the psychological state of the patient in my room. It bears examination because often where I am led are the places that the soul pieces have been lost or have been hidden. From a psychological perspective, from a therapist's perspective, it is similar in uncovering relationships, uncovering how responses and reactions occur based on not only behavior, but also based on recounted emotional states and recounted mental patterns and mental fandangling. Therapy can be much more complex world than perhaps what I share from a shamanic perspective. I think that it is invaluable to be able to bring together both the psychological aspects and the shamanic aspects of soul loss and soul healing. There isn't a competition between shamanism and psychotherapy. I believe that they work synonymously. I believe that at times there is a different language. The ability to integrate can be some of the more fascinating parts of doing soul work, rescuing of soul. I think the therapist has the opportunity for some of the deeper work in the continuation of the integration and perhaps even has more of a view to the expansion or the healing of the soul. At times for myself, doing the soul retrieval for an individual in my house, I don't always have the opportunity to follow up. I'm not always certain of the outcome. Shamanic counseling is very different from healing of the psyche, and shamanic counseling includes experiencing the journey state and experiencing the integration of the soul. That can be done through journey work, as well as it can be done through speaking about some of the changes, and in my experience, bringing in mythology as well as bringing in relatable stories of soul recovery from trauma or from abuse or from the maladies of the soul that inflict, affect, and infect the very being that we are. The ability for allopathic way of healing the mind will be a great benefit as we move through times of change and transformation. Healing the psyche is a period of transformation. Entering into the darker aspects of the psyche can lead to transformation. Psyche is the spirit. Psyche is the place of dreaming. This is the original intent of Psyche. Psyche was the lover of Eros. And if we think of Eros, and I'm going somewhere, and I mean this as a healing of Psyche because I want us to see some of the story or some of the very ancient lineage of the word psyche and of the beginning of the concept of the individual human soul. In the story of Eros, who has through time been broken down from its majestic androgynous self to little Cupid with an arrow, Eros began as a three-faced being. Eros began as an androgynous being. Eros was born of darkness and night, and Eros was born through countless centuries. Why do I bring this up? It refers to the gestation of the human soul. It refers to the gestation of the beginning of the psyche and the beginning of self. As Eros further becomes a compartmentalization of the psyche and reduces from the cosmic divinity to smaller and smaller pieces, Eros now as the definition of love or the definition of complete acceptance takes on a lover, and the lover in this essence is Psyche, is breath, is all of those aspects that we talked about in the etymology of it. Psyche and love, so those aspects of the soul, those aspects that come back from that original sense of self to blow, to become mind, to become spirit, to life, to the invisible animating principle. All of these are Psyche, and Psyche becomes the lover of Eros, the all-encompassing, accepting and personification of love. So the initial relationship of Psyche is to be in relationship with love, is to be in relationship with wholeness. Psyche being relationship to the ambiguous, to the unseen, to be broken into Eros, who has the gift of the three-faced being, so the gift of being able to have that full circumference view. So love interpenetrating Psyche in that all-encompassing view of the wholeness of self. Psychotherapy can engage the talking mind to pull out the small bits and the small pieces that come back into the self. From the shamanic perspective, I am led through various stages of a person's life and am able to identify and pick up. I know that many people operate with a guide. I don't have a guide anymore so much in respect of the spirit world. I do have horse, which will take me to many places, often to the land of the dead. I know I in the land of the dead, I do have to be careful because I've been there so many times that now I have left a pathway up into the world where I come out of the depths of the land of the dead. Imagine having the river Styx, and then there's going to be a bank, and then there's an embankment to the top of wherever I am in the middle world, in shadow, wherever I am. My path has been so worn that if I am chased by spirits, if I'm chased by beings from the land of the dead, they now can follow my quote-unquote scent. So I've had to alter how I move into the land of the dead. That is an aside to the encompassment of the feeling of the whole. It is like an act of death, that soul loss. So the reviving or the recognition of the ability to even have the life of soul, to experience soul, that is an integral part of the healing into the psyche, to bring back that awareness. We are tapping not only into the psyche of self, if we're fortunate to dive deep enough as the person seeking healing, to know that psyche is the beginning of how we perceived ourselves as light being, as a love being, as a fully whole being, birthed of deity and thought of soul and spirit. That is a significant departure from some of what I've said earlier, but I positively love it. I just want to say that for the very simple reason, if I don't share how I perceive the effect of things, then I think I give only an aspect or facet to the depth of the work of the soul. For the soul and the ability to see itself, bringing psychology and shamanism together under one roof, it's great to see our own shifts of perception, to our own shifts of where psyche resides, and how the psyche does affect the conscious mind in more subtle ways than even first imagined. In order to encounter the soul piece, to move into the collective unconscious, to move into the personal unconscious, into the subconscious place of no self. What is that place that we uncover? And we lose that piece, or we replace that part, or we don't have consciousness of that part of ourself. It's easy to tune out the voice of spirit. It's easy to tune out the call of our soul. It is easy to forget that we are unable to hear what we are no longer conscious of. We are also engaged enough to be listening, aware that we can navigate different bridges and we can awaken different beings. We can move through different states and move through different places in order to experience, explore, retrieve, and integrate those parts of psyche. So if you have had soul retrieval work done and you haven't journeyed time again to meet that soul piece, then that soul piece, that immediate effect gets lost on us. That it's one thing to get the healing work done. It's a whole other story to work the medicine. It's one thing to receive the medicine. It's a whole other story to allow the medicine to work and to follow up with the medicine the same way you would follow up in any other course of action. Healing takes place and we bring it forward. We bring it into the consciousness, into our conscious awareness. We're making the unconscious conscious. And when we make the unconscious conscious, it does change ourselves. I have had many spirit patients come back through the years to say, oh, this did shift. And the relationship with this insert family member here really did change. My relationship with my insert relationship beyond family shifted in this way or this way or this way. I know what we do in the spirit world affects our conscious day-to-day life. I know what psychotherapy does in that altered place also helps us to regain that sense of self and regain that sense of working deeper. There is lots of room in the spectrum of healing to engage the spirit and the soul and the intellect and the psychological language. It is important to engage the emotional body as much as it is important to engage the physical body. Where do you hold this soul piece now? When I blew it into your body, where did you feel the soul piece? When you get up off the table, do you feel heavier? Do you feel lighter? Do you have more clarity? When we bring back awareness or reawaken or retrieve a lost soul piece, regardless of what your language is, we fully step into who we are. And when we fully step and engage more deeply into who we are, we can take on the world and what the world has to give us with a little bit more freedom, a little bit more confidence, a little bit more strength. Getting us to where we need to go is a journey, it's a process, it's not an event. Getting a soul retrieval is an event. Integrating your soul pieces is the process. I think I have gone on enough tangents for one episode of Shaman's Way, the healing the psyche. I thank you for your constant attention and for sticking with me as my mind pondered further into the insights of soul retrieval. To my constant listener, I really hope that I have given some extra food for thought that I may not have necessarily shared with you before. To my semi-constant listener, I don't know what brought you here, whether it was healing the psyche, the words, or if you just intuitively knew that this was something you had to listen to. So welcome back. And to my brand new listener, if you've made it all the way to my sound of my voice, thank you for sticking it in and for keeping my voice in your consciousness. Until next time, sayonara.
Thank you again for joining us here on the Shamans Way podcast. If you have any questions, would like to make a request for a future episode, or if you're looking for other shamanic resources, including free drumming tracks, please visit us at shamansway.net. Until the next episode, be well, everyone.